Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Orochimaru gets female Naruto pregnant. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. Naruto looked at the chains that held his wrist and scowled. No matter how hard he tried, he could not break free of them. He had also tried to rid himself of the collar as well, but that was fruitless as well. The collar, as he was told by his captors, prevented him from gathering chakra, so he was unable to perform any jutsus. Naruto shook his head, trying to remember what had happened to him. Flashback X. Naruto had tried his best, he really did, but no matter how hard he tried, he was unable to bring Sasuke back from the clutches of Orochimaru. But that was not the worst of it. The villagers blamed him, they hated him, despised him. They hated every part of him and wanted an excuse, any excuse to get rid of him. And this was the excuse that they were waiting for. They were angry that they didn't get their precious Uchiha back, but not only that, they were afraid of him. Not only for the Kyuubi that resided within him, they were scared of his buin. It was a Kekkei Genkei, the eyes that saw into the distance, so to speak. When activated, his eyes went entirely black, even the whites. It was creepy to see, as all you saw was your own reflection in those eyes, and yet you couldn't. The buin enabled him to see into the future, and the villagers were afraid of him holding the knowledge of their future. It was also rumored that if you looked close enough, you were able to see images of your own future in those midnight eyes. Naruto had discovered it when he was training with Jiraiya, by complete chance, but we won't go into detail about that. He was able to partially activate it during battle, so he was able to see what an enemy was going to do even before they had even thought about it. When partially activated, only the iris went black, the whites being unaffected. The buin also enabled the user to see events happening on the other side of the world at that current moment in time. So the villagers, who had jumped at the chance, had gone to the Hokage about it. At first, the Godaime refused to listen to them, but when the villagers threatened to do things to Naruto that were worse than death, she couldn't help but listen. She had told Naruto of this. To say that he was upset was an understatement. He was devastated. So he did the only thing he could think of at that time, leave Konoha for good. He had told no one, but he left a note saying not to bother searching for him, as by the time they would have got to him, he would most likely be dead, what with the Akatsuki chasing him. He had wandered around for several months, never staying too long in any place, as he knew that he had been labeled as a missing nen. Naruto sighed as he walked along a secluded dirt road through a sparse forest. He was on the border of the fire country, debating whether or not to pass over into the wind country. Even though Gaara was his friend, he would have no choice but to capture Naruto if he was found. My life sucks, Naruto thought as he kicked a stone, watching as it hit a tree in front of him. He then stopped and stood listening. He wasn't alone. He looked around as figures emerged from the woods. He sighed. He didn't care if they killed him, it would be easier if they did. The one in front of him, apparently the leader, chuckled, staring at Naruto. Well, what do we have here? A little boy, ah, poor thing. Naruto didn't reply, but he did scowl at the man. Will they hurry up and kill me already? He thought a bit impatiently. The man chuckled again and said, I wonder if anyone would pay good money for him, he looks like a girl. Ah, yes, he'll be worth a lot. Naruto's eyes widened. What? He asked, feeling a little scared. The man laughed darkly and said, we're slave dealers. We sell slaves, any kind of slaves, and you look perfect. We'll have you. Naruto gasped and turned to flee, but then he felt a stinging sensation in his neck. He cried out, pulling the dart from his neck. He then blinked as his eyesight became blurry. His legs gave way and his cheeks slammed into the ground. The last thing he saw was the leader looking down at him with a smug expression. Flashback X. Naruto sighed, cursing himself for letting himself be captured. He had been here for a week now, and had only seen one person all that time. And that was the person that brought him his food. Whenever the man came in, Naruto always demanded to be let go, or to at least to know what was going to happen to him. The man always ignored him though, saying that Naruto was going to be sold as a slave to service other people. Needless to say, Naruto was pissed. He couldn't even use the buin to see what was going to happen in his future. He growled, doing yet another useless attempt at trying to free himself. Ryota smirked, pleased with himself. He and his men had just brought back a new slave that they had come across. He was staring at a computer screen, his eyes filled with greed. Displayed on the screen was all the recently required, illegally, information on the blonde teen that they had captured a week ago. Ryota chuckled. Yes, this boy was going to bring in a lot of money for him. Not only did he have a record of a strong nen, the boy also had a very rare Kekkei Genkei. The boy was in fact the last bearer at the Buin. Ryota chuckled again, trying not to wrench his arm out of its socket and trying to pat himself on the back. He then thought of some prospective buyers who would want the boy. He could think of a few, maybe he should invite them all and hold an auction for the blonde. There then was a knock at the door. Enter, he said. The door opened and a man came in and bowed. Sir, Orochimaru-sama wished to talk to you. Yes, send him in, Ryota said. As soon as the pale man walked in through the door, Ryota had a sudden thought. He knew of this mon's desire for rare Kekkei Genkei. It was a high possibility that Orochimaru would want the boy. Sit down. Nice to see you again. What are you here for? Orochimaru sat down gracefully and stared at Ryota with unnerving golden eyes. You know what I want, Ryota. Yes, well. I have a certain boy, caught a week ago that you might be interested in. As he's so recently caught, he's still wild and we haven't had a chance to tame him yet. What is he like? Well, he's fairly young, 15 years of age, but he has a Kekkei Genkei that you would be interested in. Oh? Ryota knew he had the man's interest now. Yes, he's a seer. A seer is what a person is called when they have the Buin. Orochimaru smirked and said, I would very like to meet this boy. What is his name? Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto's head turned towards the door as it opened. The man who brought his meals came in with a smirk. Come, we've found a buyer for you. Fuck you, I'm not going anywhere. Naruto retorted. The man scowled and lashed out, slapping Naruto harshly on the face. Naruto fell to the ground, stunned. He was not aware of the man picking him up by the collar and dragging him out of the room. Naruto struggled all the way, never stopping. He wanted to hurt this man so bad. When they reached the door, the man knocked before entering, throwing Naruto inside. He landed heavily on the floor, the breath knocked out of his lungs. A man chuckled darkly and he snapped his head up to glare at the man who had captured him not too long ago. He bared his teeth in a snarl. The man scowled and said, See what I mean, Orochimaru-sama, he's still wild. That does not matter. Naruto whipped his head around to glare at Orochimaru, who was looking at him with some kind of hunger in his eyes. Nice to see you again, Naruto-kun. He smirked. Naruto jerked against his restraints and snarled. Fuck you, asshole. The slave dealer slapped him around the face and punched his in the stomach. Naruto collapsed, gasping for breath. I apologize, Orochimaru-sama. We will punish him severely for this. That is quite okay, Ryota. It will make it even more satisfying when I break him. Orochimaru stood up from his seat and strode over to Naruto, who was now in a sitting position. Naruto was a little scared, not sure of what was happening to him. He was sure that it wasn't good. Orochimaru smirked down at him and asked, Confused, Naruto-kun? Numbly, Naruto nodded slightly. Orochimaru chuckled and said, I'm going to buy you, Naruto-kun. You will be my personal pet. You will do exactly as I say, do you understand this? Naruto stared at him in horror. No way, fuck you. I hate you. I'm not going to. Naruto never finished his sentence as Orochimaru grabbed a handful of his golden hair and slammed his head into the wall, stunning him. He leaned in close and whispered viciously into Naruto's ear. You better, otherwise I'll force you. I'm paying a lot to get you, so you better be worth it. Naruto stared at him, suddenly felt helpless. Orochimaru saw this and smirked. Good boy, he said, letting go of Naruto's hair. Naruto slumped, feeling himself losing consciousness. So, you'll have him, Orochimaru-sama? Yes, I will. When can I take him? Now if you wish, since you have the payment on you now. Good. Naruto swore softly just before his world went black. Tsunade frowned, staring at a report in her hand. It was disturbing news. For the last couple of months, they had been getting reports about a new group of people that caught travelers and sold them as slaves, mainly as slaves. Most of the targets were young people that have done something foolish like wander too far. Tsunade bit her lip, hoping that Naruto was alright. She knew that he was strong, but she couldn't help but worry about him. He was in the group's target age group. She sighed and called Kakashi. The Junin appeared in front of her with his characteristic. Yo! Tsunade fixed him with a stern stare. Don't fool with me, Kakashi. The Junin looked at her, frowning slightly. What is it? I have a solo mission for you. Read this report, she said, handing him the piece of paper that she had previously been reading. He took it and she watched his expression turn sick as he read it. When he had finished, he asked, "Can people really be this sick?" "Yes. And what's worse is that they have quite a few customers who buy the slaves for high prices." "So, what do you want me to do, Tsunade-sama?" "I want you to find out as much as you can about this group because—" She didn't continue and he smiled in an understanding way. "You're worried about Naruto? I can see why." There was silence in the room and then Kakashi said, "Don't worry, I'm sure that Naruto will be fine." Naruto groaned and opened his eyes slowly, trying to fight the fogginess in his brain. He moved slightly and blinked when he realized that he was no longer wearing a collar and shackles. He slowly sat up and looked about the room and frowned. The room was large and he was lying on a double bed with deep red silk sheets. There was an ornate wooden door that Naruto assumed led out of the room and then another door near him that properly led to the bathroom. Other than that, there wasn't much in the room. His frown deepened. Where the hell am I? He thought. He pushed the sheets off him to get out when he realized that he had no clothes on. What the? He covered himself up just in case anyone else came into the room to find him like this. "Ah, finally awake are you?" Naruto jumped and whirled to come face to face with Orochimaru. Naruto's mouth opened and closed a few times and then he demanded, "Where the fuck am I, bastard?" Orochimaru's expression darkened and he slapped the poor blonde, who fell back on the bed, stunned. When he came to, he realized in a panic the Orochimaru was now hovering inches above him. He trembled slightly, causing the Sannin to smirk. Naruto then realized that Orochimaru was only wearing a dark red silk robe. "In answer to your question, you are in my hideout. I told you, you're going to be my pet." Naruto's eyes widened and he tried to push him away. Orochimaru grabbed his wrists and pinned them above his head with one hand. "Ah, a fighter are we? This will make things all the more entertaining." What are you going to do?" Naruto asked, still struggling. Orochimaru chuckled and smirked, but didn't reply. With his free hand, he removed the sheets from Naruto, exposing his body. Naruto struggled even more, getting more panicked. Orochimaru whispered in his ear, "If I were you, I would stop struggling, otherwise I'll make it even worse for you." Naruto stopped struggled, but he still trembled. Orochimaru studied Naruto with lust-filled eyes. "Beautiful," he breathed. He leaned down and roughly kissed Naruto, thrusting his tongue into Naruto's mouth. Naruto choked and tried to get the invading tongue out of his mouth, but to no avail. When Naruto thought that he was going to pass out from lack of air, the older man pulled away. Naruto gasped for breath and glared at the man above him, causing the said man to laugh at him. Orochimaru then slowly removed his robe, causing Naruto to panic even more. "Don't," Orochimaru hissed before grabbing Naruto's legs and wrapping them around his waist. Naruto tried to wriggle away, but Orochimaru grabbed his hip in a painful grasp that made him gasp. Naruto looked fearfully into lust-filled eyes. Naruto didn't like the feeling of something large and hot being pressed against his entrance. He squeaked and tried harder to wriggle away. Orochimaru grabbed his hips and harshly thrust into the helpless boy, causing him to scream as he felt his insides ripping apart. Orochimaru smirked when he heard Naruto's scream. "Ah, music to the ears." He thrusted again, causing another scream to tear from the blonde's throat. He chuckled darkly before setting an erratic rhythm of thrusting in and out of the helpless screaming boy. Naruto felt like as if his insides were being ripped apart. He couldn't take it anymore, he wanted it to stop, all he felt was pain, there was nothing but the pain. After what seemed an eternity for the poor blonde, Orochimaru released his seed deep inside him. Naruto lay there in shock for a while and then started to cry weakly, the tears rolling down his pale cheeks. Orochimaru pulled out, but still kept the boy pinned under him. He smirked and said, "You'll make a good pet." "I hate you," Naruto said weakly, tired from fighting and screaming. Orochimaru licked Naruto's cheek, causing the teen to shiver in repulsion. "I think now is the perfect time to test out a new kind of curse seal I've been working on." Naruto looked at him, terror evident in his tear-filled blue eyes. Orochimaru smirked and said, "This seal will enable me to control everything you do, you'll be my little slave." Orochimaru leaned down and bit into the tender skin of the boy's neck. Naruto cried out at the sharp stinging pain that shot through his body. Orochimaru pulled back to observe the cursed seal appear on the boy's neck. It was a small black spiral. He smirked in satisfaction as Naruto lost consciousness. Sasuke was pissed. It was supposed to be a simple mission of finding the scroll that Orochimaru wanted and return it to him. What the scheming snake forgot to tell him was the fact that the scroll was guarded by tons of Anbu. He had got the scroll all right, but then they had spotted him, and he was now sporting several wounds of varying seriousness. No matter, Kabuto should be able to heal them in no time. He stormed into the medic's infirmary and barged into the man's office, completely missing the blonde-haired teen lying on a hospital bed near him. Kabuto looked up at him and raised an eyebrow as he saw the many wounds the proud Uchiha was now sporting. "Sasuke-kun, what can I do you for?" he asked mildly. Sasuke growled and snapped, "Just heal them before I rip your head from your body." "Testy aren't we? Did you get the scroll?" Kabuto asked as he proceeded to heal Sasuke's broken arm. "Yes, I did." Kabuto said nothing as he inspected a wound on Sasuke's shoulder before using the green chakra to heal it. When he had done, he dismissed the raven-haired teen with a wave of the hand as he sat down to his reports. Sasuke glared at him for the rude dismissal, but let it slide, this time. He walked out of the office and almost made it to the door before he stopped and turned 180. "Kabuto, what the fuck is this?" Sasuke's demand was heard as he had left the office door open. Kabuto came into the infirmary frowning. "What is what?" he asked, evidently confused. Sasuke growled and pointed to the unconscious blonde figure lying on the bed. For some reason, it greatly upset and offended him to see Naruto lying there, in Orochimaru's lair no less. Kabuto went up to Naruto and said lightly, "Orochimaru-sama bought him off some slave dealers a couple of days ago. He is planning to make Naruto-kun his little pet. Naruto-kun is currently adapting to the curse seal he was given soon after coming here." "Curse seal?" Sasuke asked angrily. Kabuto gently turned the blonde's head to show the small spiral curse seal on his delicate tanned neck. Sasuke glared at Kabuto, who looked at him with a small sneer. "If you have problems, Sasuke-kun, take it up with Orochimaru-sama. He's in his office right now." Sasuke turned on his heel and walked out, though you could tell his anger by his jarring strides and the heels that made more noise than necessary on the cold stone floor. Sasuke almost ran down the halls towards the vile man's office. When he got there, he casually killed the guards and kicked the door open. Orochimaru, who was currently reading a scroll at that moment in time, looked up at him. "Ah, Sasuke-kun, don't you fucking give me that shit. Why is Naruto here? What the hell was Kabuto talking about you making Naruto your personal pet?" Orochimaru looked back at his scroll and said, "I don't know why you seem to think it's your business. I was the one who bought him from those slave dealers, so that means he's my property. I thought you hated him." Sasuke opened his mouth and then closed it again before settling with a low warning growl. The snake Sannin looked back at him and relented. "If you must know, Naruto-kun has a stronger Kekkei Genkai than you. I wanted it. Naruto-kun was captured by slave dealers since he was stupid enough to let himself get caught, and they sold him to me at a very handsome price." Sasuke felt slightly sick. Why the hell would people sell other people like animals? "What do you mean by that Naruto has a stronger Kekkei Genkai than me?" Orochimaru smirked and said, "He is a seer, which means that he can see into the future. I wanted that ability, so I grabbed the first chance I had to get my hands on him." "Why the fuck did you give him a curse seal?" My, you are demanding today, aren't you? Shut up and answer my question." "Very well. The curse seal will enable me to completely control him. He'll obey my every order." Sasuke glared at Orochimaru, but he didn't say anything as he had ran out of questions. The Sannin went back to his scroll and said, "I have something else planned for the boy that will increase his use to me." "Oh? I plan to merge him with the demon. I have studied several methods of doing the ritual and I have found one that will do the least harm to him. I don't want my pet to be disfigured in any way. Why would that matter to you?" Orochimaru smirked at him before looking back to the scroll. Sasuke frowned and then he understood. He felt extremely sick. "You sick bastard, don't you dare touch him." Orochimaru laughed and said, "Do you think I would listen to you? Besides, I've already tasted him." Sasuke really did feel like as if he was going to throw up. "You really are sick?" "Yes, I know. Sasuke glared at the man for a few minutes and then, because he could tell that he wasn't going to get any more out of the man, he turned and stormed out of the room. He found himself back at the infirmary. He paused and then entered slowly. He approached the still figure on the bed and stared at him. Deep down he was happy to see the blonde, but not like this. Naruto didn't deserve this. As if on impulse, Sasuke reached out and stroked the blonde's hair, surprised at how soft it felt. He received a shock as a voice said weakly, Sasuke? Sasuke quickly withdrew his hand and stared into Naruto's eyes. Sasuke will never admit it, but he loved the blonde's eyes. They were so blue, so beautiful and full of life, something Sasuke envied. But there was no life in those blue orbs now. He was scared, Sasuke could tell. The blonde continued to stare at him as if accusing Sasuke of his current predicament. What happened? Sasuke asked quietly. Naruto turned away and mumbled. After failing to get you back, the villagers threw me out. After a few months I was captured by slave dealers. And they sold me to that snake bastard. He didn't say any more, Sasuke already knew what had happened. He gritted his teeth and growled softly. Naruto looked at him and asked softly. What is it? Sasuke looked away from the blonde, debating with himself. Uchihas never apologize, and yet, Sasuke felt as if he should since this was his fault. Then, after a while, he said, I am sorry. Naruto looked shocked. There was an uncomfortable silence in the room. What for Teme? Naruto finally asked. This is my fault. If I had come back with you, this would have never have happened to you. And it was at that time that someone decided to enter the room. Sasuke whipped his head around and scowled deeply when he saw Orochimaru enter the room. The older man came and stood next to Naruto's bed, staring at Sasuke with a raised eyebrow. Shouldn't you be training? He asked. Sasuke shook his head and said, I'm not leaving him. I don't trust you. Why does it matter to you? The Sannin asked, watching Sasuke carefully. Sasuke clenched his jaw, but didn't say anything. Orochimaru smirked and said, could you possibly have feelings for Naruto-kun? Sasuke glared at the Sannin, but still kept his mouth shut. The older man laughed softly and reached out, stroking Naruto's cheek. A look of revulsion crossed Naruto's face and he turned away, causing the man to laugh harder. Kabuto, get Naruto-kun ready. I'm going to start the merging soon. Hi, Orochimaru-sama, the white-haired man replied, reaching into a drawer for a needle filled with a strange red liquid before coming to stand next to Naruto's bed. Merging? Naruto asked, sounding panicked. Orochimaru stroked the boy's cheek again and said, I am going to merge you with the demon so I'll be able to control its power through you. Naruto glared and snarled, fuck you, you can't control me. The curse seal on you tells me otherwise. Kabuto, give him the serum. Kabuto grabbed a struggling Naruto's arm and tried to insert the needle. Note the tried to, as Naruto was squirming so much that Kabuto couldn't get near him with the needle, let alone get the thing in him. Orochimaru did a few hand seals and murmured something softly. Naruto's eyes went wide and he fell limp in Kabuto's arms as the paralyzing jutsu's effects had taken hold. Kabuto laid Naruto on the bed again and injected the serum into Naruto's arm. Sasuke watched in horror as Naruto suddenly screamed in intense pain, thrashing around and clutching at his stomach, his body glistening with sweat. The blanket fell off his body to reveal that the blonde was only wearing white boxers. The seal on his stomach was glowing bright red, with small wisps of red chakra escaping. Orochimaru looked thoughtfully at the blonde and said, maybe we should have tied him down. Shall I do that, Orochimaru-sama? It will stop him moving about. Kabuto offered. Orochimaru nodded and walked out of the room, herding a pissed Uchiha in front of him. When they had gotten outside, Sasuke snapped. Why the fuck do you have to do this to him? He's done nothing to you. Orochimaru looked down at him and said, you should be focusing on training so you can kill your brother, not some long-forgotten friend. Naruto is mine, remember that. The merging will take a few days and I want you to stay away from him. Understand? With that, Orochimaru turned and walked down the stone corridor, leaving Sasuke alone. Sasuke stood there for a few moments, trying to figure out what to do. He couldn't leave yet, but he still had more to learn. But he hated it here and even more so after Naruto's appearance. He clenched his fist as he heard another pain-filled scream from Naruto. He wondered if Konoha knew of the blonde's predicament. Kakashi ran through the forest at full speed, his nin dog, Pakun, running at his side. He had recently got his hands on information regarding the hideout of these slave dealers that Tsunade was talking about. He stopped as a cliff face came into view. He studied it for a little while and said to Pakun, "Good place for a hideout, nay?" Pakun nodded, but he didn't say anything. He sniffed the air and said, "There is a lot of movement around here. This must be their lair." Kakashi nodded and jumped down onto the ground, keeping his senses alert for any nearby enemies. He approached the cliff, searching for the entrance. It took a while, even with Pakun, but they found it. It was hidden behind a large boulder and had several jutsus to hide the fact that there was human activity was there, but only to a certain distance away were a load of footprints. "Not very good, are they?" the silver-haired Junin remarked to Pakun, who chuckled lightly. They approached the boulder to find that there were no guards at that current moment in time. Kakashi frowned, something wasn't right. They crept into the long dark tunnel and listened for any noises. There were some, but they were quite a distance away. The Sharingan user followed the source of the noise to investigate what was going on. As he followed, the noise had gotten louder as he went further and further into the tunnel. It was now pitch black. Kakashi reached out and touched the wall, shivering at the cold, a clammy feeling. Pakun sniffed at the air and said, "The people making that noise are close. Sounds like a gathering of some kind." Kakashi nodded and went further along the corridor. He rounded the corner and saw a source of light coming from an open double door. The Junin frowned and decided to investigate it. He approached the doors and, making sure that he was out of sight, looked inside. What he saw made him clench his jaw in anger. There were people there, who seemed to be an audience of some kind. A man stood on a stage, saying something in a strong commanding voice. No one noticed the Sharingan user as they were focused on this man on the stage. Kakashi strained his ears and caught what the man said. "Alright, our next item is a young boy. 10 years old, a little skinny, but of reasonable weight. He has been trained, and he has not been touched by anyone before." Just then, 2 burly guards brought in a dejected-looking brown-haired boy. He had light hazel eyes that had a defeated look in them. He wore scanty clothing that left little to the imagination. The auctioneer sneered at the boy before saying, "Bidding starts at a 1,000. Kakashi watched in horror as the price climbed higher and higher as the people in the crowd increased it. Kakashi felt slightly sick. This is wrong, oh so wrong. Kakashi turned his back and walked away when it was announced that the boy was sold for 100,000 yen. Kakashi walked down several empty corridors sensing no one. They must all be in the auction. Kakashi remarked to himself. He then stopped as he came across a door. Curious, he tried the handle, pleased that it was unlocked, and sensing nothing, he entered. He looked about. It seemed to be an office of some kind. He asked Pakun to keep guard and approached the desk, which had a computer sitting on its surface. Kakashi sat down and looked at what was currently displayed on the screen. He frowned as he saw a list of names. Probably slaves that they had information on. He saw that several had a money sign next to them. He considered what they meant and decided that it was most probably ones that have been sold already. His suspicions were confirmed when he opened one, a girl of 16, and it held all the info on the girl and her buyer. Kakashi closed that and scrolled lazily through the names, seeing if he recognized any names from all the missing children reports that had been circulated as of late. He suddenly froze, staring at the screen, at one particular name. There, displayed on the screen was the name, Uzumaki Naruto. Kakashi felt the color drain from his face. He also saw that Naruto's name had the money sign next to it. He swore loudly. His nin dog looked at him and asked, "What's wrong?" They had Naruto. That's what's wrong. They what? They've sold him though, let me have a look. Kakashi opened the blonde's file and scanned it. It had everything on the blonde, including the info on the Kyuubi and the Buin. He then looked at the buyer's information and almost had a heart attack. What the fuck is that scheming snake trying to do? He said a little too loudly. Shush, you don't want anyone to hear us, do you? What wrong anyway? They sold him to Orochimaru. Pakun stared at him in shock. He had expected them to sell the blonde to some rich noble, not one of the legendary Sannin. Kakashi looked about the room and found what he was looking for. He grabbed the disk and inserted it into the drive. He downloaded all the information into the disk and put it into his pocket. He turned to Pakun and said, "Come on, we need to go. I must tell Tsunade-sama about this. I think we found everything about these bloody slave dealers. Pakun nodded and exited the room, followed by the pissed-off Junin. Tsunade sighed as she handed the team in front of her the mission report. The team consisted of Neji as the team leader, Sakura, Tenten, Lee and Shikamaru. Now, this is a very important. Tsunade stopped as she felt a wave of killer intent. She frowned as Iruka shifted slightly beside her. Just then, the door opened to reveal a very pissed-off-looking Kakashi. Everyone stared at the Junin in shock. They had never seen him this upset before. Kakashi, what is the meaning? Tsunade was cut off when Kakashi growled. They had him. Had who? Iruka asked with a frown. Kakashi took a few deep breaths and clammed down a little. He came forward and slammed the disc onto the desk in front of the Hokage. She picked it up and looked at the Sharingan user in a questioning manner. Kakashi said, "When I got there, they were holding an auction of some kind. They sold a boy of 10 years. Tsunade narrowed her eyes as she heard gasps of shock and horror in the room. What is going on, Tsunade-sama? Sakura asked. We've been having reports of a group of people selling people as slaves. I asked Kakashi to investigate the group for me. What else did you find? Kakashi sighed and said, "You're not going to like this. Try me." Well, I decided that I didn't want to hear any more of that, so I went in search of something else. I came across an office of some kind and in there was a storage of all the slaves' files. So this disk contains all that information? Tsunade asked, holding up the disk. The Junin nodded and said, "There's more." While scrolling through the names I discovered that they had Naruto. Both the Hokage and Iruka stood up with demanding expressions on their faces. Kakashi sighed and said, "They sold him. To who?" Sakura demanded. Orochimaru. There was silence in the room as they digested this piece of information. "When?" Iruka asked, looking at the silver-haired Junin. Kakashi shook his head and said, "All the information says is who they sold him to and how much." "How much did they sell him for?" Shikamaru asked curiously. Kakashi frowned in thought and replied, 60 million yen. Everyone chocked and Iruka asked shocked. "How much? You heard me? What are we going to do?" Tenten asked. "There is nothing we can do for now. We do not know where the snake is hiding at the moment. I'll call Jiraiya and have him investigate where he is. I hope that he hasn't done anything bad to Naruto," Tsunade said while looked out of the window down onto the busy street. No one said anything, no one needed to say anything, they all knew what each other were thinking. Please be alright, Naruto? It had been 5 days and Sasuke was getting restless. He had been unable to get near the infirmary as either Orochimaru or Kabuto would appear and send him off. Sasuke was sick of waiting and he decided that he had had enough. He stalked his way to the infirmary, smirking when he had gotten there undetected. When he reached the door, however, Orochimaru's silky voice said, "Come in, Sasuke-kun." Sasuke shivered and slowly entered. Orochimaru was staring at him with a smirk on his face. "The merging is complete and I have activated the seal, so when he wakes up, he'll only answer to me." Sasuke growled, but didn't say anything. He turned his attention to the blonde and his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Before the merging, Sasuke always thought that Naruto was slightly girly looking. Now, Naruto did look like a girl, a very pretty one at that, although it was obvious he was still male. He had very feminine curves and his face could have been taken from a girl with full luscious lips and long curvy eyelashes. His whisker marks had darkened, making them stand out on perfect pale skin. His hair was now sporting red highlights and it was slightly longer than it was. Sasuke looked at the blonde's hands and saw that the nails were slightly longer than normal and slightly pointed. Sasuke stared at the sleeping form of his former teammate with a feeling that felt oddly like guilt. He turned to look at Orochimaru and shuddered when he sat the Sannin looking at Naruto lustfully. The teen looked away and focused on Naruto again. Just then, Naruto groaned and opened his blue eyes, which were now tinged slightly red. The teen slowly sat up and looked around with a confused expression on his face. "Naruto-kun," Orochimaru said. Immediately the blonde teen looked at the snake Sannin. "How are you, Naruto-kun?" he asked. "I'm fine, master," was the immediate response. Sasuke stared at the blonde in disbelief as Orochimaru stroked the boy's cheek. Naruto didn't pull away, in fact he leaned into the touch and gave a small purr. Sasuke growled and the Sannin smirked at him. The raven-haired male gave Orochimaru the one-fingered salute before turning around and storming out of the room. No matter what, Sasuke promised to kill Orochimaru and free Naruto from this awful imprisonment. All Sasuke had to do was come up with an infallible plan. Kakashi impatiently paced around the living room of his house, waiting for his lover to return from the Hokage office. He was angry with himself. Why did they let Naruto leave in the first place? It was far too dangerous for him to leave anyway. And why did Tsunade forbade them to look for him when he did disappear? Kakashi kicked the sofa and swore loudly when he hurt his foot. Please don't ruin the furniture, Kakashi. Kakashi looked around to see Iruka standing in the doorway to the kitchen. Want some tea? The scar-faced Chunin asked. Kakashi nodded and followed his lover into the small, but well-furnished kitchen. Iruka watched Kakashi out of the corner of his eye as he made the tea. The reason why he was late was because the Hokage had told him the reason for Naruto's disappearance, and the blonde's plea not to try and find him. Iruka sighed as he placed the tea on the table in front of his silver-haired lover. Kakashi took it, but didn't drink. Iruka hesitated and then said quietly, "I know why Naruto left." Kakashi looked up at him quickly, his eyes pleading. Iruka sighed and sat next to Kakashi, staring into his tea. When Naruto didn't bring Sasuke back, the villagers were angry at him. They went to Tsunade-sama, threatening to do things to him that were worse than death. When she told Naruto, he decided that it would be best if he went away. Kakashi was silent for a while and he then said bitterly, "It made no difference in the end, serving Orochimaru is as bad as death." Iruka said nothing, but he stood up and wrapped his arms around the Junin for comfort. Kakashi sighed and put his arms around Iruka's waist, accepting the comfort. The copy ninja then maneuvered the brown-haired man onto his lap. Iruka repositioned his arms to hang onto Kakashi's neck gently. "What is Tsunade-sama going to do?" Kakashi asked. "She told me that she will be sending a group out to find Orochimaru tomorrow, and you're included. I suspect that the others will be the ones who viewed Naruto as a friend." Kakashi nodded and then said, "I wonder if Sasuke knew of this. Most likely. Sasuke wouldn't save Naruto, he tried to kill him, remember?" "Yes," Kakashi said bitterly, wishing now that he had never known the raven-haired teen. "Well, we'll just have to wait and find out what happens." Iruka said quietly, giving his lover a small kiss. Sasuke scowled as he tried to read the scroll in front of him. He couldn't focus on his training because that blonde idiot was distracting him. Why was that idiot with them anyway? Did Orochimaru deliberately do this to spite him and keep him from his goal? Sasuke put the scroll aside and decided to seek the snake Sannin out to have a little chat. Sasuke walked slowly through the dark, uninviting corridors of the underground lair. He soon reached his destination and opened the door without bothering to knock. Orochimaru was there, and so were Kabuto and Naruto. Kabuto was obviously checking on Naruto while the older man watched closely. He turned to Sasuke when the said boy entered. "Hello, Sasuke-kun, how are you today?" Sasuke ignored the man and stared at his former friend. He was no longer wearing his normal attire. He was dressed in garb that was similar to Orochimaru's, although he wore tight black leather trousers and he wore arm guards similar to Sasuke's with his baggy sleeves tucked into them. Sasuke turned to glare at the old man with his Sharingan activated, causing him to chuckle at the teen. Kabuto had obviously finished with Naruto because he placed a folder on Orochimaru's desk and walked out after a long look at the raven-haired teen. Naruto went to the Sannin's side and stared at Sasuke as if he had never seen him before. For some reason, that hurt Sasuke, badly, like as if a knife was twisting slowly in his heart. Orochimaru stroked Naruto's cheek and said, "Go wait for me in my chambers, I'll join you soon." Naruto nodded and walked out of the room, not even glancing at Sasuke. The Uchiha turned to Orochimaru and asked savagely, "Well?" The snake Sannin raised an eyebrow and replied slowly, "I have tested Naruto-kun. He has the speed and power of the Kyuubi, as well as its vast knowledge and wisdom. You are in fact, no match for him. And why are you not training?" Sasuke glared at the older man before turning away and storming off. He was going to kill Orochimaru, and he'll enjoy every last minute of it. Orochimaru watched as the Uchiha stormed off, obviously going to go and sulk for a while. Not that Orochimaru really cared. All he wanted with Sasuke was his body, which has the Sharingan. And he now had the Buin at his disposal as well. He chuckled darkly as he stood up. He was tired and needed rest, so he decided to return to his chambers to freshen up. When he entered the chambers, Naruto was sitting on his bed wearing nothing but one of Orochimaru's silk robes, staring off into space. The snake Sannin smirked and closed the door and approached the blonde, who turned to regard him. Naruto looked at him in a questioning manner, and the older man said, "I'm going to have a shower. I'll be back in a moment." With that, Orochimaru entered the bathroom, leaving the blonde alone again. He quickly shed his clothes and entered the shower, washing himself quickly. When he was done, he exited the bathroom, only wearing a towel wrapped around his waist. Naruto got up from the bed and gathered another towel from the bathroom and came back into the room and approached the snake Sannin. Orochimaru sat on the bed and allowed his new pet to dry him off. When that was done, Naruto climbed into his lap and nuzzled his neck gently. The Sannin smirked as he reached up and removed the robe from the blonde's figure. He stared at the beautiful body for a while, licking his lips in want for the body that was exposed for him and only him to see. His pet sat up straighter and placed his knees on either side of Orochimaru's waist. Without even asking for permission, Naruto took one of his master's nipples in his mouth to suck in a teasing manner. Orochimaru hissed slightly and tugged at the blonde's hair, causing the boy to turn his attention to the other nipple. The snake Sannin ran his hands over the pale smooth skin of his pet, causing small moans to escape the boy on his lap as he ran his cold fingers over the sensitized skin. Orochimaru then played with the boy's entrance, rubbing it gently, receiving small mewls from Naruto. He pushed one finger in, causing the boy on his lap to groan, taking his mouth away from the nipple in favor of grabbing a handful of Orochimaru's dark hair. The Sannin inserted another finger and began to thrust them in and out, causing more moans to escape that made Orochimaru want to be inside the boy even more. He then inserted the third finger, getting in return a small gasp due to the slight pain caused by the man stretching him for what was about to happen. Suddenly, Naruto let out a loud moan as Orochimaru hit his prostrate, causing a wave of pleasure to surge through him that made him hunger for more. The moan caused the older man to smirk as his eyes darkened with lust. He hit the spot again, causing the boy to arch his back and moan. Master? Yes, Naruto-kun?" He then started to rub the spot, causing the teen to moan helplessly. "Place please, master." "Please what?" "I am more." The blonde almost screamed as Orochimaru pushed hard against his prostrate. "As you wish," the snake Sannin said as he removed his fingers, making the blonde groan in disappointment at the loss of contact. Orochimaru grabbed the boy's slim hips and pushed him down onto his erect member, groaning as he was engulfed by the tight heat. He brought the boy down fast, making his pet gasp slightly. The Sannin licked his lips as Naruto started to ride him slowly. Orochimaru hissed at the slow speed and grabbed the blonde's hips, thrusting into him harshly, hitting the boy's prostrate, causing him to cry out. Master. He thrust again, receiving more moans and cries from the boy as he buckled up into the blessed tight heat that was enough to send anyone over the edge. The boy pushed down, trying to get the Sannin to go deeper into him, to fill him more. Orochimaru twisted them so that Naruto was lying on the bed with him on top. He lifted the slender legs onto his shoulders and continued to thrust into the boy. Naruto was gripping the sheets, screaming as every thrust hit his prostrate, sending him over the edge with the pleasure. Orochimaru's hand then reached down in between them, pumped the boy in time with his thrusts. The boy continued to moan, groan and cry out to his master as the pleasure washed through his body, bringing him closer to completion. Suddenly, Naruto screamed out, Master, before he arched his back, releasing his seed onto his and Orochimaru's stomach. This caused his inner walls to clamp down around the Sannin's member, making him unbearably tight. With a groan, Orochimaru released his own seed into the boy, filling him, before slumping slightly over him, panting slightly. He pulled out of the blonde and lay on the bed, watching as his pet covered them in the silk sheets and lay next to him on the bed. The boy looked at him with hazy half-lidded eyes, his cheeks flushed slightly. Orochimaru leaned up on one elbow, stroking the soft silky hair of his pet. Naruto purred loudly and closed his eyes, obviously enjoying the close contact of his master, snuggling closer to Orochimaru. The Sannin kissed the boy on the lips, before settling down next to his pet. Kakashi stepped out into the chilly morning air. The sun hadn't even risen yet, and he had just left his lover to sleep in their nice warm bed, alone. He sighed and then shivered as the coldness of the pre-dawn air affected him. He slowly made his way to the Hokage Tower. The reason for the early hours was a complete mystery to him. He entered the tower, welcoming its warmth after the chill of the morning air, as he made his way towards the Hokage's room. He opened the door and was not surprised that there were others there. The remainder of the Konoha 11 were all there, waiting for him, and, to his surprise, Jiraiya. They turned to him when he entered and Sakura raised her eyebrow. "You're on time for once." Kakashi shrugged and replied smiling. "No one's perfect." "Alright, that's enough." Tsunade cut in, getting everyone's attention. She sighed and rubbed her temples, obviously trying to relieve her headache. "Alright, we have no clues as to the whereabouts of Orochimaru and Naruto, so you lot will split up and find them. When you do, kill Orochimaru and bring Naruto home." No one spoke into the tense silence that followed that little speech, but they did look at each other with worry etched into their faces. "Go, now," Tsunade said wearily as she took a cup of coffee from her assistant, Shizune. They silently exited into the chilly air. When they had left the village, they split into 4 groups of 3. They were to visit places where Orochimaru was known to be about and go on from there. Sasuke slowly opened his eyes and glared at the ceiling of his bedroom. It wasn't as grand as Orochimaru's, but it was enough. He sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing at his tense shoulder muscles. They were to be moving lairs today, so there wasn't really much time. He sighed as he stood, making his way to the bathroom, deciding that a warm shower would be best. He had been so tense lately. It had been a couple of months since Naruto had started, slaving under the snake Sannin as his personal pet. Sasuke shuddered at the idea of being Orochimaru's pet. It was just wrong, even more so when you count the fact that it was Naruto. The blonde acted as if Sasuke didn't even exist, only paying attention to his master, as he refers to him now. Sasuke gritted his teeth in anger. He had tried to get into Orochimaru's notes that included his research on the kinds of curse seals that he had developed, including the curse seal of heaven. But those notes were sealed away and only that blasted scheming snake could access them. Sometimes, Orochimaru would let Naruto watch Sasuke's lessons and it pissed the raven-haired teen to no end. The Jinchuriki would just sit there, staring at the Sannin as if there was nothing else in the room. Sasuke punched the wall of the shower and growled loudly. He stepped out and dried himself off before moving into the bedroom to get dressed. There was a knock on the door and Sasuke turned to it as it opened to reveal Naruto. "What?" Sasuke asked rudely. He wasn't in the best of moods this morning. The blonde cocked his head in a cute manner and said, "Master says that it's almost time to go. Are you ready, Sasuke-sama?" The Uchiha flinched at being called Sasuke-sama by the Dobi. It sounded wrong, like when Naruto referred to Orochimaru as master. He glared at the blonde, which had no affect on him, and Sasuke growled, "I'll be ready soon." "Okay, Sasuke-sama," was all Naruto said before he moved out of the room, closing the door firmly behind him. Sasuke stared at the door for a few seconds before he scowled and followed the irritating blonde. He caught up with Naruto and followed him to Orochimaru's study. They didn't say anything, but to Sasuke it wasn't surprising. The snake Sannin truly had Naruto in his cold scheming hands. When they had entered, Orochimaru looked up at them briefly before returning to his scroll with a slight scowl on his pale face. Sasuke leaned against the door frame as Naruto went to stand by the pale man. "I thought we were going," Sasuke said, crossing his arms over his chest. Orochimaru snapped the scroll shut and stood up, handing the object to Naruto, who placed it in his pocket. The Sannin then walked out of the door, telling Naruto to go and get Kabuto so that they could go. The leaving of their current underground base was an easy task, but the problem was that they had to pass over dangerous rock mountains to get to the next one. This lair was in on the border of the Sound Country and the Fire Country. It was a little too close to Konoha for Sasuke's liking, but he had to make do with it. It was a slow process, but they got there in the end, and when they did, the ninjas of that vase immediately settled them in with any hassle. Sasuke, tired after the journey, went straight to his chambers, glaring at anyone who came near him. He sighed as he sank into the depths of the bed, closing his eyes. He lay there for a few moments before he allowed his tired body to pull him into the realms of dreams. The next day, Sasuke went to Orochimaru for training. Now, normally Naruto would be there too, but the Uchiha couldn't see the blonde anywhere. He went up to the snake Sannin and asked, "Where's Naruto? My pet is with Kabuto. He was sick this morning, so I sent him to the infirmary to be checked over." Sasuke frowned. Something was wrong with Naruto? He shrugged and then returned to the training at hand without being distracted by the dobi. Orochimaru gave him a scroll and said, "This is a new jutsu I found. It should come in handy. Yes, what do you want?" Sasuke turned to see a sound nin at the door. The man bowed deeply and said, "Orochimaru-sama, Kabuto-san requests your company." "What about?" "I am not sure, but he said that you should find it interesting, Orochimaru-sama." The pale man waved the sound nin away, before pointing at the scroll in Sasuke's hands and saying to him, "Make sure you learn this jutsu, I want to see results soon." And with that he swept out of the room, leaving the raven-haired teen alone. Sasuke scowled and then, on an impulse, followed his teacher to the infirmary. Not that they would have cared if he was there anyway. When he entered, he saw Naruto sitting on one of the beds, swinging his legs in a childish fashion while humming quietly to himself. The Uchiha went up to the two men in the office and asked, "What's wrong with Naruto?" The medic nin turned to look at Sasuke and then smirked. "Nothing's wrong with Naruto-kun. I was congratulating Orochimaru-sama here." Sasuke raised a dark eyebrow. "On what?" "Naruto-kun's pregnant," was the offhand reply. Sasuke chalked and asked, What? You heard me, he's pregnant." "How?" "Well, when two people." "That's not what I mean." Sasuke cut in, glaring at both medic and Sannin. Kabuto sighed and then grinned, saying, "It seems that when we merged Naruto-kun with the demon, it passed over its ability to have children. Judging by Naruto-kun's appearance, I can only say that Kyuubi is female, hence the childbearing ability." Sasuke could only stare at the two men before turning his gaze to the humming boy on the far end of the ward. He turned back to Orochimaru and asked, Well, what?" came the infuriating response. "You have a lot to answer for, Orochimaru. I know you and your experiments on babies. Are you going to do that to your own child?" Orochimaru was silent for a while and then shrugged. "I don't really care, to be honest. So I could kill the baby and you wouldn't care?" "Not really. Maybe I should do that then." Orochimaru smirked and said, "And how do you suppose you're going to do that? Naruto is merged with a demon, a female one at that, so he would have the maternal instincts. He would not allow you to harm the child. What about you? You forget that I have complete control over Naruto-kun, so he will allow me to do whatever I wish to the child." Sasuke growled at the pale man before he turned around and marched out of the room. He stormed along the corridor, knocking away people who were foolish enough to get in his way. He exited the maze of tunnels and ran off until he stopped and looked around him, frowning slightly. He was standing beside a small stream that was surrounded by large pine trees. He breathed in the intoxicating scent of crushed pines and sat down beside the stream. He then lay back with his hands behind his head, closing his eyes, trying to organize his chaotic thoughts. So Naruto was pregnant, with Orochimaru's child. He shuddered, it was a sickening thought. He hoped that the child wouldn't survive. If it did, he would find a way to kill it. Maybe it will die at the hands of its own sire and his cruel experiments. He then thought about it, since Naruto was a demon now, wouldn't that make the child a half-demon? But then again, Orochimaru is a demon in his own right. He snapped his eyes open and sat up. A smirk made its way onto his perfect pale face. Konoha, they would want to save the blonde, so maybe he could get their help. He laughed softly to himself. He had learned enough at the hands of that sick bastard anyway, so why stay? He'll make a deal with Tsunade. If he told them where Naruto is, they would let him return to the village and resume his rank as a leaf shinobi. Yes, perfect. Now, all he had to do was return to the Konoha. He didn't have anything of value with Orochimaru, so he decided to leave now. He stood up and looked up at the stars in the pitch-black sky. He then turned his attention to the ground and started to walk away. He glanced back once before disappearing into the darkness. Sasuke frowned as he rubbed his arm. He had been on his way to Konoha when he had felt several chakra signatures nearby. They were familiar, definitely familiar. He made his way towards them, hiding in the trees. He raised an eyebrow when he saw them. Konoha 11, What were they doing here? And Kakashi and Jiraiya? He listened intently to their conversation and smirked when he heard Naruto's name mentioned. So, they were looking for the Dobi? Well, he might be able to make a deal with them. He couldn't save the blonde on his own. He watched them for a few more minutes and then decided to make an appearance. The search team gathered at the meeting place, hopeful that at least one of the teams had come up with something. They hadn't. Naruto seemed even further away than Sasuke. Kakashi eyed the group with tired eyes. What are we going to do? We can only spend so much time searching, and that time is almost up. Jiraiya gave a tired sigh. Well, when we run out of time, I'll continue searching for the boy. There was silence and then Sakura whispered. So, we're going to give up? Finished a new, yet hauntingly familiar voice from the trees above them. They all whirled to glare at the Sharingan eyes of Uchiha Sasuke. He was lounging lazily on a branch, one leg over the side with his sword on his lap. He was staring down at them calmly as if they had only seen each other the day before. They narrowed their eyes at the raven-haired teen. What are you doing here, Uchiha? Are you going to laugh at us? Kiba snarled at the raven-haired teen. Sasuke blinked at them and then frowned. He stood up and turned his back to them. Fine, if you want to be that way, I won't show you where Naruto is. Of course you know. You're Orochimaru's little pet. Kiba shouted, causing the other male to disappear and reappear, holding onto the brown-haired male's throat tightly. His Sharingan swirled at a furious speed and he growled. I am not his pet. I will never go that low. He then let the choking Kiba go and turned his glare at the others. I want to speak with Jiraiya and Kakashi, alone. They glared at him suspiciously, not wanting to leave the Sannin and Junin in the Uchiha's presence. Go, don't worry about us. Jiraiya said, waving the others away. They glared at Sasuke, but obeyed the order of the Sannin. When they were alone, the two men in front of Sasuke turned to him questionably. What do you want to talk about? Kakashi asked warily of the raven-haired teen. Sasuke frowned slightly and said, no matter how much I hate the Dobi, he doesn't deserve what that fucker has done. What did he do? Jiraiya asked, worry coloring his voice. I was on a mission at the time that Naruto was bought, so I didn't know about it until I came back. By that time, it was too late. How so? From what I can tell, Orochimaru Naruto and then gave him a curse seal. Jiraiya's expression darkened while Kakashi looked ready to throw up. And it's a special curse seal as well. Sasuke ground out, thinking back to the way that the snake looked so smug when he told Sasuke. That thought made him feel sick. What does it do? Kakashi asked, his voice shaking slightly. It makes Naruto obey Orochimaru completely. Jiraiya scowled, rubbing his chin. That would make it harder to get him back, wouldn't it? Obviously, but that's not all. Sasuke said, fingering the blade of his sword. Oh? Kakashi asked, his eyebrow rising. He merged Naruto with Kyuubi. Jiraiya chocked and stared at Sasuke in shock. Kakashi looked shell-shocked. And Kyuubi is also female, so Naruto has taken on a more feminine appearance. Sasuke continued, staring out into the forest. Shit, Jiraiya said softly, is there more? Yes actually. It seems that when Naruto and Kyuubi were merged, the demon gave Naruto the ability to bear children. They stared at him as if he had grown an extra head. What? Kakashi asked, his eye widening. I said, he can have children. How did you find this out? Jiraiya asked. Simple. Naruto is pregnant, with Orochimaru's child. Suddenly, Jiraiya burst out laughing, ignoring Sasuke who stared at him as well as Kakashi who was frozen in shock. What's so funny? Sasuke demanded of the Sannin. Jiraiya stopped laughing and said, you're joking, right? Why would I joke about something like this? He asked. Realization dawned on Jiraiya's face and he promptly fainted. Sasuke looked down at the white-haired man and sighed. He was supposed to be a great Sannin and he was now lying unconscious on the ground just after finding out that his student was pregnant. Sasuke didn't faint when he found out, but he had to admit that he was close to doing so. Kakashi wasn't any better than the Toad Sannin. He stood there, shock rooting him to the spot, his face pale and sick-looking. Sasuke scowled and snapped, will you stop that? Kakashi shook his head, coming to his senses, and stared at Sasuke, his visible eye narrowing. Why are you telling us this? Sasuke shrugged and replied, Orochimaru has served his purpose. I have no need for him now. All I want to do is kill Itachi. I see. Just then, Jiraiya groaned and sat up, glaring at the Uchiha. What is the meaning of this? What are you hoping to gain out of this? Naruto has the powers of the Kyuubi. I want his help in killing Itachi. Also, I want to be let back into Konoha with no problems. If you don't agree, I won't show you where Naruto is, understand? They stared at him, lost. Then Jiraiya, now standing, gave a growl and grabbed the teen by the collar. Fine, but you do anything remotely suspicious, I will not hesitate to kill you. Got it? Sasuke narrowed his eyes, reaching up and releasing himself from the Sannin's grasp, nodding. Good. Now, let us. This way. Naruto frowned gently. He could hear his master and Kabuto talking in the Sannin's study, and he had a feeling that he wasn't supposed to overhear, but curiosity got the better of him. You haven't found any trace? The silky voice of the snake Sannin asked in a deathly whisper, making Naruto shiver at the dangerous sound. No, Orochimaru-sama. It seems as though Sasuke-kun has left you. Naruto's frown deepened. Sasuke-sama was gone? Why? We should move base. I'm not going to chance him leading Jiraiya here. But what about Naruto-kun? Someone who is pregnant shouldn't make a journey like that. Just move it. Naruto heard Kabuto mumble something and move out of the room. The blonde's hand went to his slightly swollen abdomen. Didn't Master want the child? Something inside him growled and a harsh, raspy voice whispered in his mind. You think he cares? He's my master. I should always obey him. Naruto mentally argued. The raspy voice gave a dry chuckle. You really are pathetic. I preferred you when you were a knucklehead ninja. What do you mean by that? Naruto queried the voice in his head. He heard a snort, but no reply. Suddenly, it hissed and growled. The freak is coming. Naruto blinked when his master appeared in front of him. He looked up into the man's golden eyes. What are you doing here? Orochimaru snapped, evidently not in the best of moods. Naruto swallowed and replied, I was on my way to attend to you. Go to our room and get ready, we're leaving. Naruto nodded and darted off, ignoring the deep growling that came from the deep recesses of his mind. Sasuke scanned the surroundings. Something wasn't right. It seemed too empty. He looked over his shoulder at the others. Wait here a second. He then disappeared before anyone could form any kind of objection could be formed from the group. He stealthily made his way into the base, avoiding the occupants that were still in the base. He snuck into the vile man's study and looked about. He went to the drawers where he knew that the man kept his documents, only to discover that they were gone. He narrowed his eyes. They had moved on. He swore softly before getting up and moving towards the door, where he paused. Someone was walking towards him. He waited until the figure was directly outside the door before opening it up and grabbing the surprised sentry. The man would have yelled if not for the firm hand that covered his mouth. Sasuke closed the door with his foot and looked at the man with Sharingan eyes. The man's eyes widened when he saw who it was. He yelled and struggled, but stopped instantly when Sasuke held a kunai to his throat. Where are they? The Uchiha asked in a low, calm voice. Who? The man asked as if trying to buy some time. Sasuke pressed the kunai closer to the man's neck, receiving a small yelp. Where are Orochimaru, Kabuto and Naruto? He growled, glaring at the man, who was shaking from fear. They went to the B-base deep in the Sound Country. The furthest one, the one you were at a few months ago. Thank you, Sasuke said before quickly ripping the man's throat open with the kunai, watching as he gurgled, falling to the floor, thrashing slightly before laying still. Worthless, Sasuke whispered. He turned and walked out of the room, returning to the others. When he arrived, Jiraiya turned to glare at him. Where were you, Gaki? They're gone. What? Sakura asked, blinking at him. The other teenage members of the team stared at him, distrusting. They still did not think that he was doing this for Naruto's sake. He didn't care about their opinions. Orochimaru and Kabuto have taken Naruto to a base deep into the Sound Country. I know where this base was. I don't trust you. Kiba snapped at the raven-haired teen. Sasuke turned to glare at the brunette, who glared right back. Don't you want to save Naruto? At the moment, I am the only lead you have, so you have no choice. Sasuke, Kiba, calm down. Jiraiya cut in. He glared at Kiba before turning to the Uchiha. Will you take us there? Sasuke didn't reply, but he turned and walked a distance off when he paused, looking over his shoulder. Well? He asked. The others, evidently getting his point, moved after him. Naruto sighed as he looked out of the window of the room that he shared with his master. For some reason, he had the urge to get out of here, to be free. But he had a master whom if he disobeyed, he would punish him severely. Why don't you just follow your instincts? Naruto sighed as he leaned his chin on his arm, watching as the snow fell heavily outside, covering the ground in a white blanket. The door suddenly opened and Orochimaru gracefully entered, approaching the young blonde, who stood up and bowed deeply. Orochimaru waved that aside with a deep scowl. He clearly wasn't happy about something. The pale man placed his fingers under Naruto's chin, forcing the blonde's reddish-blue eyes to look into golden ones. "What are you thinking, Naruto-kun?" Naruto blinked in surprise at the sudden question. "Nothing, master. I only think what you do. Kill him, kill him. Rip him to shreds and feast upon his bloody remains. He is not a good mate. Kill this useless one and find another." Naruto shivered at the bloodthirsty voice in his mind, and luckily, the snake Sannin did not see this. "Do as I say." Naruto ignored the voice as his master led him to the bed. Later, Naruto was sat in the bed, wide awake. He was sat up on the side with his chin in his palm, thinking. For some reason he couldn't sleep. He was extremely restless. "You need a proper mate, one who will provide for you." "But I already have one." "You call that thing a mate? Huh, that's a good one. He sees you as his fuck toy, nothing more. He cares nothing for his offspring. Kill him." "No." There was a deep chuckling from inside his mind and he shivered. "You will, trust me. If not, I could temporarily take over your body and do the task myself." Naruto remained silent as he gazed out of the window. A mate. He tried to think of others that would make suitable mates, but only one came to mind, Sasuke. He was strong and seemed to, in his own way, be very protective of the blonde. "That's more like it, kill the snake and leave." But Sasuke-sama ran away. "I don't know where he is." "Wait, maybe he will come to you. But when he does, kill the thing, understand?" Naruto bit his lip. Another part of his mind was screaming that he should obey his master and to ignore the other voice. The blonde clutched at his head, feeling a sudden sharp pain race through his head. Both voices hissed at this. "If that snake was your mate, he would feel your pain. You must find a better mate. You need it. Make it stop." "I can't, not until your mate is found. It will get worse if you do not find him." Naruto whimpered slightly as pain shot through his chest, making it ache horribly. He gasped as it suddenly got worse, making him curl up in a tight ball on the bed, clutching tightly at his head. Then, suddenly it stopped. He gasped in relief at the disappearance of the scorching pain. He wiped the sweat from his brow, taking deep breaths to try and calm himself. He looked back at his sleeping master and frowned slightly. He shook his head and decided to at least get some sleep. Sasuke suddenly stopped in his tracks. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. "Sasuke?" he heard Kakashi ask behind him. Suddenly, Sasuke felt a sharp pain race through his head, making him cry out in surprise, clutching his head. His knees gave way and he collapsed to the floor, trembling as pain shot through his chest as well. He felt hands on his back and shoulders and only aware of voices saying things. He groaned out at the pain, curling in a fetal position, trying to keep his mind off the burning pain. "Sasuke!" He heard Sakura cry just before he lost consciousness. Sasuke slowly regained consciousness, only vaguely aware of the happenings around him. All he was aware of was an aching in his chest. It made breathing hard for him. His head was pounding and he groaned slightly. "Sasuke?" he heard a soft voice say beside him. He slowly opened his eyes, wincing as the light caused a pain in his head, making the headache worse. He blinked a few times, clearing his vision. Sakura swam into view with Kakashi hovering over her shoulder. "Ah, finally awake are you?" he asked, grinning down at him. Sasuke said nothing as he slowly sat up, trying to ignore the aching pain in his chest, and looked about. They had set up a camp and most of the others were asleep. With the exception on Jiraiya and Neji, who were acting as guards. "What happened?" Sakura asked gently. Sasuke frowned at this. "I don't know. I felt pain in my head and chest and I passed out, it's still there," he said softly, rubbing his chest gently as if afraid to push too hard. Sakura blinked and said, "I checked you over, but I found nothing wrong. You've been asleep for about 9 hours. Sasuke took no heed of this and slowly stood up. "I'm thirsty, bring me some water." he ordered, and Sakura rushed off to obey. Kakashi looked at him through his visible eye. Jiraiya and I checked your curse seal as well. There was nothing wrong with that either. Sasuke shrugged, though the cause of the pain confused him. Sakura came back and he gulped down the water, waving them off. When they did, he sat down against the tree that way nearby. He rubbed his temples, feeling the pain gradually ebb away. What the fuck is wrong with me? Your mate needs you. A deep growling voice whispered at the back of his mind. He jumped and looked about, trying to see if anyone heard it. They were all going on with their tasks as if nothing had happened. What the hell was that? Your wild side, so to speak. It is dormant in most people, but you're special. You already knew that, didn't you? Who are you? I have no name. I am you. Well, part of you anyways. Shut up. What were you talking about, a mate? Mate? What shall I tell you? Okay, you have a mate that you need to find, soon. If not, you will both suffer horribly, and that could lead to you killing yourself. You don't want that now, do you? I can't go looking now. I have to save Naruto? Oh, you feel so protective and possessive over him, don't you? What? Nothing. Sasuke scowled deeply, but decided not to answer. He had heard that hearing voice was a sign that you were going mad. He didn't want that. Can we move on now? Jiraiya asked from beside him. He looked up at Jiraiya and then swept his eyes over the rest of the camp, frowning in surprise when the camp was packed and the other were ready to go. You spaced out for an hour? Jiraiya said, amusement clearly heard in his voice. Sasuke stood up and roughly brushed past the Sannin, heading the way they had the previous day. Whatever. Come on, he said as he walked off, not paying attention to the fact of whether the others were following him or not. Naruto snapped his eyes open when he felt someone roughly shaking him. He looked up at Kabuto and then back to the bed, only to see that Orochimaru wasn't there. He looked back at the medic Nin, who ordered, "Get dressed and go to Orochimaru-sama. You've overslept and he's in a bad mood today." Naruto was quiet as the man walked out of the room. He then stood up and entered the bathroom, washing himself up before going back to get dressed. You know, there was no need for the bloody mood warning. That fucker has been in a bad mood ever since Sasuke left. Yeah? When Naruto was done, he walked down the cold halls, hugging himself in an attempt to keep himself warm. When he got there, he slowly opened the door and entered the Sannin's study. The said man was sitting at the desk reading a scroll of some kind. He looked up when the small blonde entered and hissed, "About time you got here." Naruto bowed deeply, mumbling, "Sorry master, but I was unwell." Again? Hi. I had a headache and chest pains. But it is going away now. Orochimaru was silent for a little while before hissing, "Get up." Naruto did as he was told quickly, moving over to the man, who was watching him intently with his golden eyes. When Naruto was close enough, the Sannin grabbed the boy and pinned him to the desk, glaring at the small blonde. "What has been on your thoughts lately? You're not acting as you should." His voice was low and soft, but you could hear the thread dripping off those simple words. Naruto trembled and replied, Nothing master. I think only why you think I should." The man glared at the blonde suspiciously, but didn't release his grip on the shaking blonde. Naruto didn't want his master finding out about the little voice in his head, nor the fact that he wanted to find his real mate. His master wouldn't be happy if he did that. The pale Ran grabbed Naruto's collar and forced his head up, kissing him roughly. Naruto stayed still as his master explored his mouth with his long tongue. For some unknown reason, Naruto felt sick at the feel of the other's tongue. "Kill him." Naruto whimpered as the snake Sannin pulled away to look at him again. "You are mine, you understand?" he asked viciously, tightening his grip on his collar and arm. Naruto could do nothing but nod as Orochimaru kissed him again. Sasuke slowed down briefly before carrying on running, a small scowl on his pale face. The pain in his chest just kept getting worse and it was making it extremely hard for him to breathe. He wouldn't show the others his current weakness. Kakashi, who was running beside him, asked, "Are you alright, Sasuke? You don't look well." Sasuke scowled at him and said quietly, "I'll be fine. A little chest pain is all." "A little? You seem to be having difficulty breathing. Maybe you should have Sakura have a look at it." "No, I'll be fine. We're almost there anyway, so what's the point?" Kakashi didn't answer him as they continued on their way. Judging from the layout of the landscape, they were only an hour run from the base. XX. Naruto looked up from the scroll he had been reading with a frown. He had this strange feeling all of a sudden. Sasuke's coming. Where? When? He's near. I should tell master. Don't you dare, you little snip. But, I said don't. Stop listening to that creature, listen to me. The blonde hesitated and then nodded, placing the scroll on the desk in front of him. What do I do? Nothing for now. When they are near enough, go to Orochimaru. Sasuke will follow you and you better help him kill the poor excuse for a snake. Naruto frowned, not too sure of this plan. Would it work? Yes, if you let me temporarily take over your body. You do want a proper mate, don't you? Yes. Well, okay, I'll let you. Good. Just then, a thought came to him. How come I only started talking to you for the past week? Because the curse seal has weakened. I've been gradually destroying it the moment it was placed on you. Oh, I see. You should prepare yourself. You will be in great pain when you have control of your body back. Understand? Yes, I understand. Good. The blonde gave a sigh, placing his feet on the chair and hugging his knees to his chest. He then stood up, deciding to go on a walk around the base. He walked out of the room and stopped, looking down either corridor. He gave a small shrug and went down the left one, since he knew that was a long route to take to Master's office. After a while, he passed some cells which held prisoners inside. He looked at them as he walked past, noting their dispirited body language as well as their shabby clothing. They watched as the blonde walked past them, their eyes pleading him to free them. Naruto hated seeing them like this. However, Orochimaru wouldn't let him free them, so at the moment he was powerless to help them. Maybe, when his master was gone, he could free the prisoners. You could, but one thing at a time, Naruto? The blonde then stopped, giving a small yawn. He's closer now. You should go to that freak. It's too late for him to do anything, so you might as well tell him. Okay, I will. The blonde slowly made his way to the snake Sanin's study. He knocked on the door and waited for an answer. Enter, Naruto-kun, he heard Orochimaru say. I can't wait until he's dead. The blonde opened the door and walked inside, looking at the pale man that was seated in the high-backed chair behind the desk, writing something. He closed the door behind him and approached the desk, aware of Orochimaru's golden eyes locked with his red-blue ones. What do you want? Master, I can sense that Sasuke-sama is approaching our destination. As soon as he said that, a loud explosion sounded in the air, causing the ground to shake violently beneath them. Naruto momentarily lost his balance and he had to grip the table to steady himself before he fell over. Orochimaru hissed in anger, standing up. XX. Sasuke watched as part of the hideout was destroyed with the help of several explosive tags. The stone flying out in all directions, leaving a large gaping hole. Several guards came running out, looking wildly about, their curse seals at level 1. Sasuke narrowed his eyes, the tomo of his curse seal spreading slightly over his neck and slightly onto his face. He jumped down from his spot in the trees in front of them and they stared at him, shocked by his sudden appearance. You Uchiha Sasuke, what are you doing here? One of them stuttered. Killing you, was all he said before he lunged forward, drawing his long sword and slashing one of the men before turning to the others, but was too late as they had already been neutralized by the other Konoha nen. Without looking at them, he ran into the base, neatly knocking out any guards before they had time to react. He walked along the corridor, his eyes narrowed as he was constantly looking out for any signs of danger. He glanced at the others behind him before stopping in front of a cell full of men, who stared at him, wide-eyed. With a quick motion, he broke the lock, causing the door to swing open. To have them milling about would increase the confusion, but it would work in their favor. He carried on as the prisoners ran out, thanking him as they went. He stopped when they reached a fork in the corridors. Sasuke already knew where to go. All he needed to do was separate himself from the others. He ran off down the right one, ignoring the shouts of the others behind him. He ran through the twisting corridors, managing to lose the others behind him. He wanted to kill the snake with his own hands. He then smirked when the door was in sight. He stopped just outside the door, charging chakra up in his left hand, manipulating it into a sword shape and sending it through the door. He heard a cry of pain and smirked. Using his sword, he cut away the door and looked in at the scene. Orochimaru was near the far wall, glaring at him with his golden eyes as his arms were pierced by the chakra sword. Sasuke's eyes then trailed to the blonde on the right-hand side, looking a little confused and shocked. Sasuke entered the room slightly, the chakra sword neatly pinning the snake Sannin's arms to the wall. The pale man hissed, his golden eyes going to the blonde. Kill him, Orochimaru hissed at Naruto. The blonde looked unsure, but took a step in Sasuke's direction anyway. The Uchiha watched with his Sharingan activated. Suddenly, the blonde gasped, doubling over as he clutched his head. Sasuke winced and hissed as sharp pain raced through his head. Naruto cried out, one hand supporting his weight while the other clutched at his head. All of a sudden, the blonde was still. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes and hissed, "Naruto-kun, kill Sasuke." A dark chuckle escaped the blonde and he looked up and Sasuke frowned when he saw blood-red eyes looking at them. Naruto looked up, staring at Sasuke as if inspecting him. The smaller male's eyes then went to the snake Sannin. "I said, kill him." "No," Naruto said. His voice was different from before, more feminine sounding, yet it held a dangerous edge to it. Sasuke then frowned and asked, "Kyuubi?" The blonde turned to him with a chilling smile. "That's right, Sasuke-kun. Now, why don't we kill this poor excuse for a ninja, nay?" Orochimaru glared at the two of them. "What the hell, why isn't the seal working?" he asked. Naruto, Kyuubi gave a laugh. "Ever since you put it on my host, I've been breaking it down, so I can take control of Naruto's body. Oh, I've wanted to do this for a while now. You're a terrible mate, you know that. All you used Naruto for was your little fuck toy. I plan to end that. When I've killed you, I think I shall find another more suitable one." Naruto, Kyuubi licked their lips and mused. "Now, Sasuke-kun, how shall we kill him?" "Simple, cut his head off." Sasuke replied, a smirk on his lips. Orochimaru looked nervous. But that's too quick, we have to make him suffer." Kyuubi replied, smirking as she stared at the helpless Sannin. The demon and Uchiha exchanged a look before Sasuke nodded and rushed forward, breaking his chakra sword as he swung his metal sword at the Sannin. Orochimaru ducked the attack and dodged to the side. Naruto, Kyuubi hissed and grabbed the Sannin's arm from behind, the sharp nails digging deeply into his pale skin. Sasuke gave a smirk and advanced on the pale man. With a thrust of his sword, he impaled one of Orochimaru's legs, getting a hiss of pain in return. He twisted the sword, making the wound deeper and wider, getting a small cry of pain in return. "Now, what shall we do with you, Orochimaru?" The Sannin didn't reply, but simply settled with glaring at the Uchiha. The clawed hands holding the Sannin started to glow with a red chakra and there was an evil chuckle. "Now, Orochimaru, I'm going to burn you alive. Hope you like." Orochimaru screamed as his body was encased in the boiling chakra, withering as his skin darkened to a black color. The Uchiha's nose twitched when the sickening smell of the burning flesh reached his nostrils. Sasuke watched, almost entranced as steam rose from the male's eyes and mouth as his insides were burnt through, his mouth wide open in a silent scream of pain and horror. All of a sudden, the man stopped moving and lay still. That went quicker than I thought," Naruto, Kyuubi said, almost mournfully. Sasuke gave a snort and looked at the demon with half-lidded eyes. "What are you going to do now?" Thoughtful eyes turned to look at him and the demon stepped forward until the two were mere millimeters away from each other. Sasuke looked down at Naruto, Kyuubi and raised an elegant eyebrow. "Yes?" Naruto, Kyuubi smiled at him. "Tell me, Sasuke-kun, how much do you want to kill your brother?" The Uchiha narrowed his eyes, wary as to the demon's intentions. "I'm an avenger. I'll do anything to avenge my clan." "Oh good then, by the way, this will hurt." "What will?" he asked, feeling extremely wary. Naruto, Kyuubi smiled as they lifted their hand as it glowed with pulsing red chakra. "I'm going to remove that curse seal. You have no use for it now." Before the Uchiha could form any kind of protest, a clawed hand lashed at him, gripping the shoulder where the curse mark was, pain shooting through his body. "Shit, that hurt." Sasuke gave a pained hiss as his skin was burned by the deadly chakra. His vision became blurry as the pain increased. Feeling his knees gave way and he hit the floor, hard. Naruto, Kyuubi looked down at him with emotionless eyes. "That's better," was all she said before Sasuke lost consciousness. Naruto gasped as he was aware of being in control of his own body again. He gave a cry, dropping to the ground as he clutched his chest, feeling like as if it was being ripped to pieces. His eyesight blurred as he looked at the figure lying next to him. Even in his pain, he could recognize who it was. Sasuke? You're free now, kid. Sleep. Okay, I will. The last thing he was aware of was the door being flung open violently. XX. Jiraiya cursed to himself. That bastard Uchiha had disappeared and then they had been attacked by a load of sound nins. The bastards just kept coming. When the last one had been disposed of, a scream of intense pain reached their ears. Orochimaru gave a small bark as they raced off down the corridors towards that scream. They neared a wooden door when Jiraiya paused, feeling malicious chakra as they heard a loud hiss of pain. There then was a small cry and then silence. Not being able to take it any longer, Jiraiya and Kakashi roughly threw the door open and their eyes widened at the scene that lay before him. There, lying on the floor was the charred remains of the snake Sannin. Jiraiya fought to control his stomach as the sickening smell of burnt flesh reached him. His eyes then trailed to the unconscious figure of the Uchiha, lying not too far from them. He then turned to the other figure in the room and his eyes widened. It was Naruto, but at the same time it wasn't. The blonde was more feminine looking than he had been and could easily be mistaken for a girl. His hair was also now sporting crimson highlights. Jiraiya went to the teen and turned him over, tapping the soft cheeks gently, trying to rouse him. The eyes slowly opened to reveal blue eyes, tinted red. They focused on him and a small smile appeared on the blonde's lips before Naruto lost consciousness again. He gave a sigh of relief. He looked over at Kakashi and Sakura, who were looking over the Uchiha. Is he alright? Sakura looked at him and nodded. A fever is all, so he should be fine. Jiraiya nodded and gently picked the blonde up, walking out of the door. The others stared at the blonde, mixed emotions flickering across their features, relief, shock and a little awe. Is that Naruto? Kiba asked in a quiet voice. Yes, that bastard snake. What has he done to Naruto? We don't fully know. Let's just get back to Konoha, okay? XX. Tsunade sighed as she looked at her two patients. The two had not woken up since their retrieval from the sound base. Naruto just seemed to be sleeping peacefully, but Sasuke had a fever that was hard to control. She sighed as she changed the damp cloth on the Uchiha's forehead. The village had been happy that he had returned and was more than willing to let him back in the village. But Tsunade was still going to give him punishment, but it depended on Naruto. If the blonde didn't want Sasuke punished, then she wouldn't. Not after all he's been through. She gave a sigh and looked back at the Uchiha. She then frowned. Was his condition caused by the curse seal? Maybe it had a negative reaction after the Sannin died. She pushed back the cover slightly to reveal the pale neck. She then blinked. There was no curse seal. Instead, there was a burn mark, in the shape of a claw. It shimmered slightly in the light. She frowned again before giving a sigh. She then moved off to ponder this discovery. The rest of Konoha 11 was concerned more about Naruto than the Uchiha. They had been told about the Kyuubi and the fact that Orochimaru had forced a merging between the two. They didn't care. They knew Naruto was no demon. He was a host, a carrier, a prison, a human sacrifice. What they were more concerned about was the blonde's pregnancy. They were horrified by the fact that Naruto was pregnant with Orochimaru's child. They hated that Sannin. They hated him for bringing such suffering on the blonde. Tsunade gave a sigh. Naruto was only 4 months pregnant and was still able to have an abortion. It was up to Naruto whether he kept the child or not. She hoped for the latter. XX. Sasuke sat up all of a sudden, ignoring his protesting muscles that screamed with every movement. He looked about frantically and frowned when he saw that he was in a hospital. His eyes then trailed to the sleeping blonde figure lying on the bed next to him. He sat back with a sigh, wincing as his shoulder throbbed painfully. About time you woke up. A voice growled and he snapped his head around to glare at Tsunade. She approached him and stood next to his bed. Tell me what happened, she demanded, getting straight to the point. Sasuke looked at her through half-lidded eyes and said slowly. When I separated from the others, I came across Orochimaru and Naruto. I pinned Orochimaru to the wall, rendering him unable to attack. He ordered Naruto to attack me, but something happened. Kyuubi took control of Naruto's body. Tsunade's eyes widened at this and she motioned for him to continue. Kyuubi then talked with Orochimaru, saying something about him being a weak mate and deciding to go out and find another. He, or she, helped me kill Orochimaru. She burned him alive with her chakra. She also removed my curse seal. I know, I saw that. All that's left of the seal is a burn mark. We're all waiting for Naruto to wake up now. Sasuke gave a nod as the woman turned around to leave. He suddenly asked, "What about the baby?" Tsunade stopped in her tracks, but did not turn to face the Uchiha. "I don't know, Sasuke. It's up to Naruto now. If he wants to keep it, it's his choice. I'll help him no matter what." And with that, she was out of the room. Sasuke slowly pushed the covers back and swung his legs around so that they touched the floor. He slowly stood up and went to Naruto's bed, sitting in the chair next to it. He gave a sigh and looked the blonde over, his eyes lingering on the swollen stomach of the teen. He gave a sigh, rubbing his temples as he could feel a headache coming on. God, he needed more sleep. He moved back to his bed and lay down on his side, facing the window, his eyes closed. The room was quiet, save from the gentle breathing of both occupants. After a while, Sasuke fell into a light doze. He was later awakened by movement in the room. He rolled over and sat up, staring at Naruto, who appeared to be waking up. He quickly stood up and went to the blonde's bed. Naruto opened his eyes and stared at Sasuke blankly before sitting up and looking about with a frown. His eyes then refocused on Sasuke again. "Sasuke, where are we? The last thing I remember is being in that hospital room after Orochimaru bought me, and then Kabuto injecting me with something. The rest is blank. Sasuke, where are we and what happened?" With a sigh, Sasuke sat down on the bed next to the blonde. "Simple really. That curse seal made Orochimaru control you completely, so it's no surprise you don't remember. He merged you with Kyuubi." Naruto's eyes widened and he then looked down at his lap. It was then that he noticed his swollen stomach. He looked back up at Sasuke with a light scowl. "Sasuke, why am I fat?" The Uchiha shifted, feeling uncomfortable. "You're not fat," he said, looking away slightly. Naruto fumed and snapped, "Yes, I am fat." Sasuke turned back to him, feeling slightly angry, and growled, "You're not fat, you're pregnant." There was a deep silence in the room as Naruto absorbed this information. "I'm what? Pregnant? Kabuto explained to me that Kyuubi was female and gave you the ability to carry children. The baby is Orochimaru's." Naruto's jaw dropped and he then looked very sick. Quickly, the raven-haired teen grabbed a nearby bucket and gave it to the blonde just in time for Naruto to throw up. When the blonde was finished, Sasuke took it away and placed it near the door. He then went back to Naruto and asked, "Are you alright?" "And no, just the thought of being pregnant with a child of Orochimaru." Naruto then shuddered and hugged himself as he rocked slightly. He then looked at Sasuke with slightly fearful blue-red eyes. "How did I get here? We're in Konoha, right?" "Yes, we are. After I heard you were pregnant, I ran off. I was getting sick of staying there anyway. I came across your rescue team and lead them to where you were. You and I, well, Kyuubi actually, since she took control, killed Orochimaru. And then, we were brought back here." Naruto then looked at the plain t-shirt and shorts Sasuke was wearing. "Why are in hospital clothing?" Sasuke pulled back the shirt to reveal the burn mark on his neck. "Kyuubi removed the curse seal. I blacked out, so they must have brought us back." Naruto then looked worried. "But wouldn't you be punished?" "Depends." Tsunade cut in, walking through the door. She smiled kindly at Naruto. "The villagers and elder do not wish to punish the Uchiha here. I would want to, but I think the decision should be up to you." Naruto blinked and looked at Sasuke before saying slowly, "No, I don't want Sasuke punished. He helped save me after all." Tsunade gave a nod. "Then no action will be taken against him." "Naruto, what do you want to do? About the baby, I mean." Naruto looked down at his swollen stomach and then looked up with pained eyes. "I don't really know. Give me time to think." "Okay, we'll leave you be for now," Tsunade said gently. She then wrapped her arms around the blonde and kissed his forehead. "No matter what you want to do, I'll help you no matter what, okay?" "Thanks, Oba-chan." Naruto gave a small sigh as he lay awake in the hospital bed, debating with himself on what to do. He did not want the child he was currently carrying, and yet he could not bring himself to abort it. It was wrong to kill an innocent. And the child is similar to him in a way, being something not within its control. It was also strange to know that he was carrying a being that depended and survived off him. It felt, he wasn't sure he was able to find the words to describe how he felt. He felt awkward. I mean, he was a guy and he was pregnant. He closed his eyes briefly before opening them again to look over at Sasuke, whom was sleeping in the bed nearby, his back turned to the blonde. Naruto gave a sigh and a small smile. He was grateful to the Uchiha, and a little surprised by the older male's actions earlier that day. Flashback X. Naruto sat up straight in the hospital bed, his arms wrapped around his knees, staring at the Hokage in shock. "So I have no home?" he asked, his voice showing his shock and anger. From the other bed, Sasuke watched the scene with intent dark eyes. Tsunade gave a sigh. "Yes, Naruto, you have no home. The villagers burned it down after you left." The woman then gave an angry sigh and looked the blonde in the eyes. "Naruto, it is partly your fault. You shouldn't have run off like that. Everyone has been so worried about you." The blonde lowered his eyes and mumbled quietly. "If I had stayed, I still would have gone through shit. I don't even remember what happened after the curse seal was placed on me." "And that's a good thing, isn't it?" "Yes and no, let's forget it, okay? First things first is that we have to find you a home." She was cut off when Sasuke's cool voice cut through the air, startling the two blondes since they had forgotten about him. "Naruto can stay with me. My house is big enough for him to stay as well." There was silence in the room after that proposition as Tsunade and Naruto stared in shock at the youngest Uchiha. Did Sasuke just say that? The dark-haired teen stared at the two with a lazy half-lidded gaze. "Sasuke, are you sure?" Naruto asked, his voice uncertain. Sasuke gave a shrug and turned his head to look out of the window. Naruto looked at the Hokage, whom had a thoughtful frown on her young-looking face. After a small pause she said, "Yes, I think that would be a good idea. The council wished to keep an eye on you two and it would be easier if you two were in the same house." Naruto blinked cutely and then smiled. "Okay Oba-chan." The old woman's eyebrow twitched at being called a granny, but the woman smiled and ruffled Naruto's blonde red locks. Naruto then turned to Sasuke and said quietly, "Thank you Sasuke, for everything." Sasuke glanced at him before giving a small nod. Dobi. The blonde's jaw dropped as he stared at the Uchiha in shock. His eyes then narrowed and he hissed, "Teme, I try to thank you, but you throw it back in my face." Uteme. Naruto missed the small smirk hovering on Sasuke's lips. Flashback X. Naruto gave a small shake of his head, getting the memory out of his head. He gave a small huff, glaring at the sheets. Sasuke treated him just the same, typical of the Uchiha. Damned bastard. Naruto gave a sigh and turned over, closing his eyes. Tomorrow was when Sasuke and he were going to be discharged from the hospital, and also living in the Uchiha mansion together. Naruto gave a sigh. He didn't mind living with the Sasuke. It was the fact of the two alone there. Well, there were going to be Anbu guards watching them. But it would still feel creepy, living in a place where an entire clan was put to death in a single night. Just leaving the ghost of their memories to haunt the mansion. Naruto gave another sigh before dropping off to sleep. Naruto was awakened when someone shook his shoulder gently. He opened his blue eyes to look into the light green ones of Sakura. "Time to get up Naruto," she said quietly. With a yawn, Naruto sat up, rubbing his tired eyes. Sakura gave a small laugh before setting a tray in front of him. Naruto pulled a face. "No ramen." Sakura obviously noticed this and gave a small sigh. "Naruto, ramen is not healthy, especially when you're with child." Naruto crossed his arms and gave a cute pout. The pink-haired female gave a smile before moving off towards the other bed. Sasuke was already awake and sat up in bed, staring out of the hospital window at the street below. He made no move to acknowledge the green-eyed female as she gave him the food and attempt to strike up a conversation. But after a few failed attempts, she moved off and out of the room with a forlorn expression on her face. Only then did Sasuke turn away from the window and to his food. Naruto gave a shrug and turned back to his own food, eating it. When he had finished, the door to the room opened and Tsunade walked in. Naruto gave a small grin and jumped up, going over to the woman. She smiled at him, ruffling his soft hair before giving him a pile of clothes. "Put these clothes on Naruto. You're being discharged today and I do not want the villagers knowing of your pregnancy, okay?" Naruto gave a nod, taking the clothes from her, moving back to the bed, placing them on the sheets. He then looked down at his hospital gown with a frown. He was glad to get out of this thing. He hated hospital gowns, he had been in enough to know that he hated them. He looked up when he heard the curtains being drawn around his bed. When he was completely hidden, he quickly slid the gown off and slipped the boxers and trousers on. He paused, his fingertips lightly touching his swollen stomach. He gave an involuntary shudder. "Naruto, you done yet?" Tsunade asked. Naruto blinked before shrugging the baggy top on. He then walked out to see Sasuke there already in loose black trousers and top. Sasuke looked good in black, he noticed. Tsunade looked him up and down and then gave a nod. "That looks okay. Right, you two, for 6 months you will be confined to the Uchiha mansion under watch 24/7. Sakura, Kakashi and Iruka will be the ones to do any shopping for food and things for you too, okay?" Naruto gave a small, yes, whereas Sasuke just gave a small nod. Tsunade gave Naruto a small smile before turning to Sasuke with a stern face. "Uchiha, understand this. I do not trust you, even though you helped to kill Orochimaru. If you try to escape or hurt Naruto in any shape or form, I will not hesitate to kill you, understand?" Sasuke was silent for a few moments before giving a nod. Tsunade gave the pale teen a long look before turning back to Naruto. She enveloped the small blonde in a hug and said, "Kakashi should be here shortly to take you to the Uchiha mansion, okay?" Naruto gave a small smile and a nod. Sasuke did nothing but glare at the unoffending wall. A second later, a cloud of white smoke announced the arrival of the said Junin's appearance. Kakashi came visible and smiled at everyone, draping an arm around Naruto's shoulder, then giving the blonde a friendly smile. "Hello Naruto, how are you today?" Naruto grinned at him and replied, "A little tired, but otherwise okay Kakashi-sensei." The Junin gave a nod and then looked at the Uchiha. "Ah, hello Sasuke, how are you?" "Ah, good. Now, I'm to take you two to the Uchiha mansion, is that right?" Naruto gave a small sigh at their sensei's tardiness and gave a nod. Kakashi gave him the eye smile. Kakashi gave a small nod to the Hokage before herding the two teens out of the room. Naruto and Sasuke said nothing as the white-haired Junin led the two out of the building into the bustling street. Naruto was a step behind Kakashi and Sasuke, looking around at everyone nervously. There were curious looks directed at him, but no one seemed to recognize him, which, in his opinion, was a good thing. But what Naruto didn't like though, were the strange looks that he received from many of the young men. They looked at him with intent, hungry gazes, making him feel uncomfortable. Instinctively, Naruto grabbed onto Sasuke's arm, as if seeking protection from the Uchiha. Sasuke noticed the sudden pressure on his arm and he looked down at the nervous blonde, noticing the small blonde's flittering gaze. Sasuke looked about and scowled when he noticed the lusty looks at his blonde. Wait, when did Naruto become his? Naruto wasn't his, yet. He then gave a smirk when he remembered that he was going to be alone with the small blonde for 6 months. His smirk widened, lucky him. He decided to let the blonde hang on to him, since he liked the idea of the blonde looking to him for protection. Plus, the slight pressure on his arm felt nice. Kakashi looked back at them, blinking when he saw Naruto hanging off the Uchiha's arm. His visible eye then looked at Sasuke, the eyebrow rising in a questioning manner. All Sasuke did was jerk his head to the side, causing the Junin to look about them, noticing the looks the trio, or rather Naruto, was receiving from the crowds around them. He gave a snort before moving closer to the pair. "I suggest that we get a move on, we don't want the crowd to attack us where we stand now, do we?" Sasuke gave a nod. Even though he liked the idea of Naruto clinging to him, he did not like the looks directed at the smaller male. Naruto was only his to look at. "I told you that you were rather protective of him, didn't I?" Sasuke frowned. What did that voice want? "What do you want? Oh, touchy are we?" "Shut up, just tell me what you want." "Oh, nothing really. Just checking up on you. How's Naruto-chan?" "He's fine, he'll be living with me from now on." Sasuke didn't know why he was telling his little inner voice this, but he felt he needed to. In fact, he didn't even know what that inner voice was. Was he going mad? "You're not going mad Sasuke, I can assure you on that one. And that is very good news, you know. Maybe that pain will stop? It's already fading." Sasuke frowned. The voice was right. Before they rescued the blonde, his head had been continually throbbing like as if he had a migraine and his chest was constantly aching, making it hard for him to breathe. And now being close to Naruto, it had faded somewhat, as if the blonde's very presence deterred the pain from rearing its ugly head again. Sasuke? The soft voice of Naruto snapped him out of his daze, and he blinked down at the blonde. What? You kind of spaced out there for a minute. Are you okay? He asked, his blue-red eyes filled with concern. Sasuke blinked before nodding with his usual frown. I'm fine, Dobi. I was just thinking. The blonde puffed out slightly in his indignation. It was rather cute, making Sasuke chuckle. It was so fun teasing the small blonde. After a little while they reached the silent Uchiha mansion. They stopped outside the open gates, staring inside at the eerie buildings. Unconsciously Naruto clutched at Sasuke more, causing him to wince at the intense pressure. Naruto, please don't grip me so hard, you're stronger than you think. The blonde looked at him startled before he let go, a small blush on his cheeks. Sorry Teme. Naruto pouted at the one-syllable response. It seemed to be a well-defined skill of the Uchihas. The ability to avoid all conversation possible by using the one syllable of HN. I suppose it went with their cool and composed image that they had. The blonde gave a snort. That was just stupid, really. Seriously, what was wrong with talking? The three stared into the empty compound, obviously not wanting to step inside. Sasuke clenched his fists. He really didn't want to come back here. This place caused him painful nightmares of that fateful night that changed the course of his life forever. He briefly wondered what would have happened if Itachi hadn't killed his clan that night. A sigh fluttered past his lips before he stepped into the compound, feeling the familiar chill run up his spine whenever he did. He walked up to the front door and slipped it open, vaguely aware of the footsteps of the other two behind him. He stepped inside and looked about. It was so dark and empty. Hollow. Lonely. He narrowed his eyes slightly, making his way further into the house, his feet picking up a small amount of dust with each footstep. The house was in need of a thorough clean-out. The structure was still sound, it was just covered in a layer of dust which needed to be gotten rid of. At least Naruto and Sasuke had something to distract them for the duration of their confinement. Sasuke only hoped that the blonde would continue to live here after everyone stopped watching their every move. Sasuke opened the door to the kitchen and scowled. This really was the first room they needed to tackle. He turned his head to look over his shoulder at the other two. Looks like we have some cleaning to do. Kakashi gave a small chuckle. It would help keep you two occupied. I'll go get you cleaning tools to help you. And with that the man poofed off. The other two stayed silent for a small while before Sasuke gave a snort and walked into the kitchen, nudging the table slightly with his foot. He then walked over to the sink and turned the tap on, scrunching up his eyebrows in disgust as brown water came through. He decided to leave it like that so that the pipes would clean out with the continuous water flow and clean water would then flow through. He then moved over the fridge and opened it, narrowing his eyes when it was not working. He moved around the back, pulling it forward slightly before sighing. Rats or mice had chewed through the wiring. This was going to take longer than he thought. Sasuke? The raven-haired male blinked and looked up at Naruto. He had almost forgotten about the blonde. He gave a small grunt to show that he was listening as he inspected the rodent damage. It looked like they needed a new fridge. He felt a poke in his side and looked at the frowning blonde now standing next to him. What is it, Dobi? The blonde's frown deepened at them before he pouted. Sasuke, where are we going to sleep? Right, fuck. That needed to be sorted out too. He thought for a moment before he jerked his head towards the doorway. Come on then, I'll show the bedrooms and the bathrooms. It's going to take a while to clean all this out though. The blonde nodded in agreement and looked about the dusty kitchen. He then followed Sasuke as he walked out of the kitchen and through several halls towards where all the bedrooms were located for the main house Uchiha. Sasuke stopped outside the only closed door, glaring at it. Don't ever set foot into this room. The blonde blinked in confusion. Why not? Sasuke gritted his teeth and snarled. It's Itachi's room. Naruto remained silent, thinking it would be best if he didn't say anything to further upset the raven-haired male. He shifted his feet slightly before saying in a small voice, "The bedrooms, Sasuke." The Uchiha snapped out of his dark thoughts before walking onto the rooms furthest away from Itachi's. He pointed to one room. You can stay in that one. My room is right next to yours, so if you have any problems during the night you can come and wake me up. Naruto nodded before he walked into the room that was assigned to him. It was a small room, but it had the essentials like a futon, chest of drawers, a bedside table and lamp. Of course everything was covered in a layer of dust. He walked up to the futon and smacked his palm onto it, coughing and sneezing at the cloud dust. Inside his mind he could hear the Kyuubi laughing at him. He ignored it and walked off back into the corridor, looking into Sasuke's room to see him seated on the bed, whipping away dust from photo frames with his t-shirt. The blonde walked in slowly and sat next to Sasuke, watching him with calm blue-red eyes. The Uchiha gave no hint that he knew the blonde had entered the room as he continued with his work, cleaning the frames and placing them in a pile. When he had finished, he turned his head to look at Naruto in a questioning manner. The blonde blinked and then smiled at him. "Nay, Teme, where's the bathroom?" "Down the hall. You should be able to find it. Do me a favor and turn on the taps and shower and let them run for a while. The pipes need cleaning out." The blonde nodded before nodding and skipped off down the corridor, looking through the doors before he came onto a rather spacious bathroom. The toilet was behind a closed door in the corner. That would need a good cleaning. Naruto hummed softly before he approached the taps, turning them all to full blast, wrinkling his nose at the smell of stagnant water. He turned on the shower as well before he made his way back to Sasuke's room. As he passed Itachi's room, he paused, staring at the closed door. He felt curiosity pull at his mind, making him want to go inside and explore the room. Maybe find a hint as to why Itachi killed the clan. Whether it was an order from someone or Itachi's own whim. Or even if he had help. The blonde found it hard to believe one man could kill the whole of the Uchiha clan save for his younger brother. That was another question that bugged Naruto. Itachi killed the other children, but why save his own brother? It just didn't make sense. None at all. Deciding it was best if he got back to Sasuke before the Teme wondered where he was. He bounced down the hall and poked his head through Sasuke's door. The Uchiha was still in the same position as when he had left, his eyes blank as he looked off into space. The blonde frowned at this. This was the second time today he had caught him daydreaming. What was he thinking about? The past? Time really was too short to be brooding on that past. It only leads to never-ending circles of pain and hurt. Naruto had discovered this himself. He wondered if Sasuke had realized this as well. The blonde stepped in front of the dark-haired male and snapped his fingers in front of Sasuke's face. Onyx's eyes blinked rapidly before they glared at the blonde for disturbing. "I did what you asked me to do, Teme." Sasuke nodded before standing up. "What should we clean first?" The blonde shrugged. "I don't know, bathroom and bedrooms first. Our ones before doing the kitchen then everything else. I would have thought that Kakashi and the others would bring us food. So I really want a clean place to sleep tonight or at least a shower." The Uchiha nodded before he sighed. It seemed like mission impossible. But they needed a clean home, especially if Naruto was keeping the child. There was a tense silence in the room before there was a puff of smoke and Kakashi appeared, smiling at them. He held a medium-sized box, which he quickly deposited on the floor, disturbing the dust on the floor. "These are the cleaning tools you are going to need to get this place in shape. The others agreed to help you get this place livable again for you too. We don't want you living in a filthy house now, would we?" he said with a smile. Sasuke gave a soft snort. The others didn't care about him, they just cared about Naruto. If it was just Sasuke they would have just left him here all alone to clean it up. Which most likely would take years in its current state. And even then he would have to start all over again. Naruto grinned at the Junin. "Thanks Kakashi-sensei. We're going to need all our help we can get. It's a mess. It has been empty for a few years." Sasuke pointed out, frowning lightly. The blonde shrugged, rubbing his upper arms as if trying to warm himself up. "So when do we start, Teme?"
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.